So Sony made plenty of headlines this past week because of their unprecedented move to increase the price of PlayStation 5. I don't think I've ever seen a major console increase in price from its original launch MSRP, but that's exactly what's happened with PlayStation 5, as explained here by PlayStation itself via their blog post published on August 25th, 2022, with a headline that reads, PS5 price to increase in select markets due to global economic environment, including high inflation rates. Scrolling down, you'll find additional details. They cite global economic environment is a challenge. They cite high global inflation rates, adverse currency trends, challenging economic conditions as reasons for why this price hike is happening, but they also did say that there will be no price increase in the United States. So folks living in the US won't be impacted by this, but folks living in Europe, UK, Japan, China, Australia, Mexico, and Canada will. And then they conclude by insisting that this price hike is a necessity for PlayStation as a business. Though necessity is likely an exaggeration, it's not about, oh, we need to do this in order for Sony as a company to survive. It's more, we need to do this if we want to keep investors happy, if we want our financial books to look good when the next financial briefing comes around. They say right here that I know many of you around the world are no doubt experiencing these economic environments and the challenges that come with that, but it's not a good look when you acknowledge that and then come out and say, we're going to make that worse for you, for folks outside the US, by increasing the prices of PlayStation 5 and making them less accessible. And you can see right here some of these price increases are not insubstantial, especially in certain regions where the currency exchange rates and stuff like that causes the PlayStation 5 price to be a little exorbitant. Industry insider Daniel Ahmad also highlighted here how increased cost of manufacturing and distribution is a major factor for why Sony decided to execute a price hike. And this comes in shortly after Meta decided to increase the price of their Quest VR headset by $100 across the board. While they are offering a free download of Beat Saber for a limited time, that's only a $30 value, so not much there, especially when you consider that they're also increasing prices for accessories and refurbished units for Meta Quest 2, which is particularly egregious coming from Meta, given that they are one of the biggest companies in the world and they could afford to weather out the storm of this current economic environment, but because they want the financial books to look good in front of investors, this is what they have decided to do at the expense of customers. And with Sony, the least they could do is offer some free digital goods, like a free game to come alongside the increased price, or free PlayStation Plus subscription months. Whatever it is, just some way to compensate for the price hike, especially with digital goods, which are infinite in supply. This whole situation has not been good for Sony and PlayStation's optics, and they're about to get worse with how Microsoft and Nintendo have responded to the PlayStation 5 price hike. So right here we have a report from Windows Central, who reported on Xbox's response to PlayStation's price hike. And scrolling down, we'll find a statement provided to Windows Central by a Microsoft spokesperson who confirmed that there are no plans to raise the price of the Xbox Series X or the Xbox Series S. The exact quote provided reads, "We're constantly evaluating our business to offer our fans great gaming options. Our Xbox Series S suggested retail price remains at $300. The Xbox Series X remains at $500. Now, it is correctly pointed out by Windows Central here that it isn't a hard guarantee that we will never see a price hike. They never pledged that they will never be increasing prices for Xbox consoles from now until the end of time, but in the short term, at least, they seem pretty committed to keeping prices the same. It's certainly an encouraging sign that Microsoft has no intentions to do so in the short term, as Windows Central put it. The door certainly is open for Xbox to change its mind, but according to an analyst that Eurogamer spoke to, Piers Harding-Rolls, he believes that Microsoft will want to leverage the negative optics surrounding PS5's price hike. He said, quote, "It seems likely Microsoft will first want to take advantage of Sony's increase to push its value message, especially around the Xbox Series S, Game Pass, and its all-access offer as we enter the holiday shopping season, before making any sort of plans to follow up with a similar pricing move." Not to mention that Microsoft is such a huge corporation that they can absolutely afford to weather out the current economic situation. They're a bigger company than Meta, so Microsoft especially has no excuse to increase prices for Xbox consoles and pretend it's a necessity in the current environment when they have so much freaking money and continue to make so much freaking money. They're a $1 trillion company, I believe. Hell, at one point, the company's net worth was at around $2 trillion. But so far, so good. They're adamant that for now, prices will be maintained. And it should be noted that Microsoft's main goal with this generation of consoles isn't to push hardware, but rather to push Xbox Game Pass. That's sort of the main platform that they're really trying to bolster, and Xbox consoles are more vehicles towards Xbox Game Pass. And with Xbox Game Pass subscription numbers continuously rising, they're pretty well positioned for, recurrent revenue. All right, so that's Microsoft. Next up, we have Nintendo. This is an interview conducted by Nikkei Asia on August 11th, 2022. The headline here says it all. It reads, Nintendo Switch price isn't going up despite higher costs, says the president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa. So this was before the PlayStation 5 price hike. So they already had this stance before that happened. But after the price hike, Nintendo was asked again, and they were adamant that prices won't be increasing for the Nintendo Switch, or that there were currently no plans to do so. We'll get to the post PS5 price hike Nintendo response in a bit. For now, let's take a look at the interview here. Scrolling down, we'll find the exact quote. The question asked was, are price increases an option? The response provided reads, we're not considering that at this point for two reasons. In order to offer unique entertainment to a wide range of customers, we want to avoid pricing people out, a based stance. Our competition is the variety of entertainment in the world, and we always think about pricing in terms of the value of the fun we offer. Our products also include software. Nintendo has sold more than 100 million Switch units so far, and it's important to maintain the momentum of our overall business. Generally speaking, a weak yen makes domestic Switch sales less profitable. And then one more question, can Nintendo absorb the rising costs of materials and shipping? He went into a bit of detail about that. For the time being, our OLED model will continue to be less profitable than our other models. Costs have undoubtedly increased for shipping, not only by air, but also by sea. We're thinking about what we can do. The weak yen may be seen as a benefit for Nintendo, since such a large share of our sales comes from abroad, but our overseas promotional and staff costs also go up. We're making more inventory purchases and foreign currencies to counter that. So Nintendo's really going out of their way and maneuvering around current challenges in order to keep Switch prices at their current cost. So that's definitely a stance that's going to yield a lot of positive reactions. And not to mention, Nintendo is a smaller company than Sony. So them taking the stance of not increasing prices, where Sony and PlayStation have decided to do so, it's just even worse optics for Sony and PlayStation. Though maybe the fact that Nintendo Switch units are much cheaper to produce than PlayStation 5 units, given that the hardware is more dated and Nintendo Switch prices haven't decreased since launch, really, maybe Nintendo has an advantage in terms of margins, but it doesn't change the fact that Nintendo has been facing the same struggles and issues and disruptions that other tech companies have in terms of shortages and the global economic conditions and disrupted supply lines and distribution and all of these things. In fact, IGN's article covering this makes it a point to point out that Switch sales have dropped 23% on the year by volume in the April to June quarter amid shortages of semiconductors and other parts. Nintendo's expecting a 29% drop in annual net profit in the fiscal year ending March 2023, even though it is planning on selling 21 million Switch consoles. So Nintendo is being negatively impacted by the current global situation in a tangible way, but still, their stance is, we're not increasing prices, and I hope that stays that way. Now, them choosing their words carefully by saying we're not increasing prices at this point does again leave the door open for them to change their minds down the line if conditions change. But the extensive statement that Nintendo provided doesn't give me the sense that Nintendo is trying to pull the rug from under us in the near future. They are trying their best to keep prices at bay. Not to mention that now that Microsoft and Nintendo have put statements out there with a stance that we don't plan to increase prices for now, it does put some pressure on them to not increase prices, because it'd look really bad if suddenly they did hike up the prices for their respective consoles after saying they wouldn't do so. And so that element of pressure and the potential PR backlash does mean that, they're going to have to consider things more before they rush to jump the gun on something that may potentially backfire and that might yield negative optics not worth the price hike. Now, to close things off, here is one more statement from Nintendo. This article is from August 26, 2022, so a day after Sony and PlayStation officially confirmed that a price hike would be happening in regions outside the US. Scrolling down, you'll find the statement provided when reached out to by news outlet Eurogamer. Nintendo's full statement includes a quote from company president Shuntaro Furukawa given during its June AGM, and then reiterates that Nintendo's prices are staying put for now. Here's the statement in full. As our president, Mr. Furukawa, stated at the 82nd Annual General Meeting of Shareholders in June, while we cannot comment on pricing strategies, we currently do not have any plans to change the price of our hardware due to inflation or increased procurement costs in each country. We will determine our future pricing strategies through careful and continued deliberations. While the final price to consumers is always determined by retailers, as Mr. Furukawa stated, Nintendo has no plans to increase the trade price of its hardware. So once again, they seem pretty adamant, and if they were to go back on their word shortly after the statement was provided, it would look very bad for them. Yeah, Nintendo also points out the global economic challenges. They point out inflation, increased procurement costs, etc. But whereas Sony's saying because of that, we need to increase prices outside the US, Nintendo's saying even despite all that, for now, we're planning to maintain prices. So among the big three in the consoles gaming landscape, Sony is the only one right now who is deciding to increase their major console's price, and they're the odd one out. They're the ones kind of facing the negative optics, whereas the other two companies are deciding to stay true to the launch MSRP. We'll see how the situation plays out. We'll see how long it takes for Sony to eventually decrease the prices back down to original MSRP. And we'll see how long it takes for the world to just get back to enough normalcy that manufacturing and distribution costs can stabilize and supply chains can be smoothed out and everything can resume as it was before. And we can start seeing some depreciating prices for hardware. That's one man's take anyway. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this whole situation. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.